Why are you mad at me?
You have the same answer.
The journey here was filled with sadness and anger, but these games stand above all others on the N64. Today, Austin Hargrave, Gerard Khalil, Jared Knabenbauer, and Shane Gill join me, Forrest Lee, as we decide what game is truly the best of the best. It's Super Mario 64 versus Ocarina of Time, and this is Madness. Here we are. This is it, the grand finale of Season 1 of Madness. What's the best N64 game? Who could have imagined it would come down to Super Mario 64 and The Legend of Zelda, Ocarina of Time.
Let me say this. I will start with this. Take it how you will. Even before it came out, my AOL screen name was Link64 Rules.
My original World of Warcraft login was fucking Oni Links because Link was taken.
You're a nerd.
Mm-hmm.
Where do we even start with this one? Sheesh.
Two games that arguably haven't aged that well.
Which one took the original 2D franchise and brought it to a 3D space and did it better?
I don't know.
Wait, how about this? Which one of these franchises kept trying to be that game for decades to come?
I would say Mario 64 was an almost complete departure from Super Mario World. It reinvented itself to work in 3D.
I think even today we classify the two like Mario formulas, right?
Even like
Nintendo themselves does that.
Yeah.
Even though we say like 2D Zelda and 3D Zelda, they're both like structurally the same. But when you say 2D Mario and 3D Mario, you know you're talking two different.
Those are completely two different genres.
Yeah, that's fair.
So what does that mean?
Don't know.
If I were to take a snapshot decision right now between the two, Mario 64.
Overall?
Yeah.
Interesting. Not what I expected from you.
Right. That's what I would say. Because again, a lot of it is, Zelda's similarity to Link to the Past. But again, when it comes to a Nintendo 64 game, what uses the hardware and really utilize that 3D space, my God, Mario does so much more than Zelda. Zelda has the hook shot, which was awesome. Like that really changed the way you played the game. They had the hover boots for a little bit. You're swimming down and around. Mario 64 had running, wall jumping, long jumps, literal flying,
which was bad.
Also
though.
Swimming. It worked fine at the time.
As an owl that drags you into the sky.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
I like it when the game plays itself for me, so I just sit there and watch. That's pretty fun.
So when it comes to like just using that 3D space, which Nintendo 64 brought to the industry, Mario 64, even as a launch title, I feel like still did more with it.
Here's something. Oh, go ahead.
I agree, but also, Legend of Zelda isn't a platformer.
That's fair. That's fair. Yeah.
And for what it was, it went above and beyond.
Zelda doesn't even have a jump button.
Here's a question. Can we compare some of the levels in Mario 64, which we already said had some ups and downs, to the dungeons in Ocarina of Time, which I would argue
also have ups
very
and
few
downs.
bad
Also have
ones.
ups and downs.
Really? You think so?
Yeah. The water temple.
Yeah, but I mean, was it really that bad?
Yeah.
I'll tell you something. I can play any Mario 64 level and know exactly what I need to do every single time. When I play Ocarina of Time, I have a few moments of, okay, where am I going next?
It is a puzzle game, though.
That's true, but in terms of like, if we're talking about replayability and like remembering your
Just finding your
games,
way through the dungeon shouldn't be a puzzle.
Right, exactly, and that's something that whether or not the game stands as a time is the question. Like, if we're talking about comparing what we remember and know,
You
from
kind
those
of
games,
lose your orientation in 3D space in Zelda sometimes, whereas I don't feel like I've ever lost where I am in Mario.
You can lose where you are with the camera angle.
Right, but what he's saying is the minute you play let's say you jump in a Bomba Medical, right, and you start hearing those first few notes, you instantly recognize, oh, I know where I am, I know what I have to do, I know the tasks, I know where to go. Whereas Ocarina of Time, when you enter, it's like, okay, yeah, I remember this dungeon, but wait, what room is it again?
I'd say even beyond that, like if you like look around like a 360 view of where you are in Mario 64, you just, oh yeah, I'm in that place. You could do that in a bunch of places in Ocarina of Time. I'd be like, wait,
I'm in the same corner that I started in.
Let's let Austin.
Valid points, and I'm not going to take away from those, but I do want to reiterate they're two completely different games. I mean, Mario 64 is a platformer. Ocarina of Time is an adventure puzzle game. So there are, I mean, the criticisms are still fair. I mean, you know, but they are doing completely different things. Zelda is not inherently a fast-paced game. Mario 64 is. I mean, and that's by design.
Arguably, keeping your orientation in 3D space matters less in Zelda as well.
Yeah.
I would also argue that the fact that sometimes when you look around you're not exactly sure where you are, that lends to the fact that Ocarina of Time has a very cohesive world, whereas...
Does it? How?
Well, I mean...
I would say, like, Hyrule is a place in a world... Like,
where's the explain yourself button?
Explain yourself.
in Super Mario 64, you're jumping into the... Like, we brought up this point previously. You jump into the pings and you're in a completely different time and place, basically. It might as well not even be the Mushroom Kingdom. Whereas Hyrule, it all has, like, a similar theme. It all has a run-through. You're in that place.
There's different towns. It feels like you're in a real world, whereas
Yeah.
Mario 64 is kind of like, it's just like a drug trip, kind of, in a way.
Yeah.
Which is not a bad thing, but...
You look confused, Gerard.
I'm confused also.
Yeah.
I think
What
understand what you're saying.
specifically are you confused
I mean,
about?
basically,
I don't see how losing your orientation equals cohesive world. I'm still stuck on that point. I don't understand.
Well, take that
I'm
particular
not
thing aside, I guess. I think what he's...
Even beyond that, it's like, why is it a more cohesive world?
I'm
The
not-
only difference is you're not jumping through a painting to get somewhere.
I'm not necessarily saying that, like, losing your orientation means that you're in a cohesive world.
It is more tangible. Maybe I can try to...
Go
What
for it,
I'm
man.
getting at what you're saying, and I'm agreeing to it an extent. I'm not necessarily saying it's a good or bad thing. But in Mario 64, like I said, it's just kind of this crazy drug trip, and you're going in these weird worlds and stuff. But in
That's the part that confuses me.
Ocarina of Time is definitely more of a story-based game, where you're in a world. I mean, there's a map.
You walk into the fire dungeon, and you're like, yes, this is the volcano. We are in a volcano. We are in this place.
8 years later, it's still exactly the same layout, but everything's messed up. It's more of a story. It's more of a story. There's more lore there in the world, whereas Mario 64 is just like whatever.
You're
Have
jumping
fun.
into this, like, I saw you get confused about the drug trip thing. That game is very, very...
But Mario in general is a drug trip. You're an Italian plumber jumping on mushrooms.
I didn't say that was a bad thing. I mean, I'm down with some drug trip games.
I would say another major factor in favor of Mario 64 is the overall fun factor. Like, just playing it, what's fun? And Ocarina of Time has boring parts, and Mario 64 doesn't.
Yeah.
It may have some more difficult levels or levels that are unfair, but that all depends on your ability to understand how to play the game.
but you're
the better you get at the game, the more fun you can have at
You're
the
still
game.
engaged, you're still doing stuff. Ocarina of Time, Hyrule feels boring, man.
It is, yeah, and that's part of the reason
Especially
why...
if you don't have the horse.
That's part of the reason why I like Majora's Mask more than Ocarina of Time, because I feel like the world is overall more fleshed out.
You're right, but we're not arguing that.
I know, I'm just bringing that back out, since this really shouldn't even be happening right now.
now. It's a realistic, cohesive world in that, walking through a field and walking through a desert.
Sucks. It's
Ooh, yeah.
lame.
It's real bad.
Yeah, like even like secrets, I feel like Zelda 64 telegraphs them so hard that's uninteresting.
As satisfying as it is to get stars in Mario 64, though, I think there's an argument that Ocarina of Time is a much more satisfying game when you complete a dungeon. There's that.
Yeah, I was
that
gonna
feeling.
get to
There's
that.
more,
Wait,
there's
Mar-
more anxiety and build up, and then when you finish the boss, you're like,
I wanted to get to that, but
Yeah.
stick with the fun factor for now. Like, we'll come back to that
Okay.
for sure. Between the two, Mario 64 is one of those games as a kid, or even now, I could load up any stage and just screw around in and have fun. Like, I don't need to get the star to have fun.
yeah.
For like, how many times you just
Right on the
load
shell.
up, Bob-omb Battlefield just to fly around. I did Lethal Lava Land a lot because I loved riding around the shell.
I did that in
going
Tiny
across
Huge
the water.
Island. I would
Tiny
like,
Huge Island, mess around,
I would come up with my own
sport.
skateboarding tricks. Like,
Yeah.
you go up this ramp and then
yeah.
go down, and that was worth
fun.
so many points. But if you did this,
Whereas Ocarina of Time has such a structured adventure to it, like it feels like you need to do this. And the screw around stuff is more like the fishing mini game, the horse
there's
racing mini
some
game.
side quests.
Bomb Tube Bowling?
Yeah, that was.
This is kind of like, it's a sandbox game versus a railroad, right?
It's not really. I wouldn't say sandbox.
yeah.
It's linear.
I'm just talking about overall fun, what's still fun to play, and which one's less boring. Mario 64 has the advantage here.
Yeah.
Before we move on to the point you wanted to get to, Gerard, I feel like you're thinking real hard about something. What's up?
It's a point I wanted to make, and it's that it's very fascinating that many people out there think that the very first game on the console is the best one.
Yeah.
Right? Like, isn't that
That's
isn't
weird,
that
yeah.
fascinating to think about? That out of the
that's
out
an
of,
accomplishment.
out of the
console-
275 plus games that were on the N64,
The launch title's the best one?
first one was the one that everyone remembers and still talks about to this day, and is still always remembered and revered as like the one. It's the same for things like the NES and the Super NES, right? With
Breath of the
Mario.
Wild with the Switch, even you could say.
Yeah.
Right,
I mean, we don't know, obviously.
Mario
but
World on Super Nintendo. Like,
Right,
one of the best
but
ones.
I think the thing to say from it is the first one was the best one, and I don't know what that means for this
It
argument.
could just be Nintendo knows that they need to sell their console with a really good launch game. I
Well,
guess.
that's true, but I mean, like,
Tell that to Nintendo when they launched the Wii U.
right?
I'm sorry, what? Jordan, I wonder how much of that has to do with the nostalgia rose-colored glasses that we get from, oh, this is the first time we're in this open 3D Mario world, versus, like, does it deserve it? Do you guys think, like, that was an interesting thing to point out. Do you guys think that
Wait.
Mario 64 deserves that?
I don't know if that's always the case for anything.
Mhm.
Like, Super Mario Bros. 1 is not the best Mario Brothers. Final Fantasy
Not even
1
on-
is
not
not
even
the
on
best
the
Final
NES.
Fantasy game.
Yeah.
But Super Mario 64 is still one of the best Nintendo 64 games.
Mm-hmm.
Still one of the best 3D platformers.
So I think this...
Arguable, but I would
think,
agree.
I just think it really is that special of a game.
Yeah. No, that's
Well,
fair.
but-
I don't think a 3D platformer rivaled it until Odyssey.
Yeah, I mean,
I like the Galaxy games a lot, but those are...
yeah, I
Galaxy are
enjoy
very
Galaxy
good,
a lot.
Those are
But
different.
Yeah.
Odyssey, yeah, it's probably the next one that really, like, directly,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know.
And it took, 20 years, basically.
I think we have to kind of decide when talking about the best N64 game. Fun factor, huge component. Multiplayer, not in this case.
Can I just point out how fascinating it is that we talked about how important multiplayer is for the Nintendo 64,
And it didn't make it to the
and
top?
it didn't even make it to the finals.
Right.
So the brackets.
Well,
It
because-
didn't even win the losers final.
Well,
Yeah,
it's
it's almost like the argument was bullshit. And Paper Mario should be.
the argument was not bullshit. It's because the two arguments of what make N64 games great, based on our conversation, is either multiplayer or single-player experiences.
I
And it looks like in this room, with us talking, single-player experiences tended to outweigh the multiplayer.
That's where I wanted to kind of bring up Ocarina of Time, because like I said, I'm not going to the whole time, because that is one of the things that made Ocarina so strong, like Shane was kind of bringing up, was sure it doesn't have like the necessary like kind of screw around whee fun factor as Mario 64, but how freaking satisfying was it in Zelda where you finish that dungeon, or like kind of to become adult Link and like your mind is blown, now you're this whole other being and your world has changed.
Get
When
that
you-
new item.
When you finally get that item, when you finally get to the end and defeat Ganon, like there's a whole nother level of satisfaction in playing that game and finishing it compared to Mario.
And not to
Because
mention,
we talked about how, you know, Essence of N64, that adventure, and arguably Zelda had a better adventure than Mario 64.
and also we haven't really mentioned it all. It also had a story.
Well, I want to take a step back though, because I think Shane talked about it earlier, and the conversation that started up this right now is who made the transition better from 2D to 3D, right? Mario 64 made a massive leap for Mario in terms of how 2D games are done. And you could argue the same thing for Zelda, right? 2D to 3D. But I think what really hindered my experience, I talked about it a couple times, is a lot of what makes Ocarina of Time great was borrowed and established from Link to the Past. And that's not a bad thing. It's not a bad thing by any means.
Link to the Past even has a pseudo Z-axis.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And
Oh yeah, with falling up and down in the different levels.
yeah,
of
and
the game.
it's not necessarily a bad thing, but what I will say is, for me, the thing that I look for most in games is how original and fun they feel. And I think, I hate using the word rehashed, we use it a lot, especially with the Majora's Mask and Ocarina of Time stuff.
Sorry.
No, it's okay. I feel like there's a lot in Link to the Past that the Ocarina took. And it's not to slight it, but I think in terms of what defined what in the transition, I think that's where Mario 64 shines. There's a lot of stuff that, Yes, there are Goombas. Yes, there's bombs and whatnot. But like,
Yeah, I feel you there.
3D platforming, those are completely original.
How many bosses in Zelda were literally just taken from Link to the Past?
Right.
Like in the fight with Ganon where you hit the ball back and forth, that's just the Ganon fight.
That's the Aghanim fight from the Hyrule Castle in the beginning of the game. You have to the sages. Great, those are the maidens from the game. The 3 pendants and the Master Sword. Like, there are direct correlations. Dark World, Light World, time in this timeline, time where it didn't happen.
Do you think that the Zelda formula just, as a whole, is a hindrance to Ocarina of Time?
Well,
at least in this specific scenario?
Yes, and that's why I think Majora's Mask was the better game, because it was trying to do this thing where it's like, we knew what Link to the Past established what Zelda was, and Ocarina of Time essentially took that and made it 3D and did a great job of making it 3D, but it borrowed a lot from that.
Well, you're asking what made a better transition to 3D. I think advantage by default links to the genre Mario 64 did. Because the fact that it was a platformer, that it was about moving around a 3D space in interesting ways.
And I think that's the show. The level designs in 64 are bonkers. It's weird. It's crazy. And it only gets crazier the better you get at the game.
Yeah, except for those levels like Tick-Tock Clock and Rainbow Cruiser.
But those, even those levels, for as difficult as they may be, they were designed with intent. And the intent was, you suck at the game, it's time to get good because you're at the end.
Or skip this level.
Maybe that's a point in Mario's favor. If you don't like a level, you can get enough stars in a different level that you do like.
Or you can go get better at the game first, try different things, and then come back to it. You're pissed off? Ugh. In Zelda, it's like you get to a point where you're stuck and you're like, well, I can't grind or do other missions. Exactly. I can maybe explore a little bit.
Yeah, and
I have to go to Cheat Code Central and figure out how to do this.
Yeah, there's definitely those points when I was a kid playing a Zelda game, as much as I loved it, where I would get frustrated and stuck in a dungeon, and I'm just like, I'm just going to step away, and I wouldn't play for like another week or two. Whereas Mario 64, I mean, there's certain stars where I was like, where is it? But if I couldn't figure it out, just come back later.
But there's another point. That frustration, even bigger payoff when you do get through it.
Yeah. So they're kind of revisiting that.
I mean, that's the same for both, really. Same with Zelda. I mean, so this is a more general question. What is something that Zelda does that does give it advantage over Mario 64's best N64 game?
Better narrative.
Better narrative, better story, characters.
I feel like narrative
is that necessary for Nintendo 64?
Well, I mean, Mario.
I feel like narrative is hard to
I think it communicates its story in a more interesting way.
Yeah, like the story is still really good, but I don't know if that's really a factor in determining if it's the best N64 game ever. Because I'm looking more like functionality wise.
Yeah, it's a part of it.
Yeah.
I think it's hard to compare the narrative because the narrative doesn't cross in the 64 genre. It crosses to what came before, right? Can you compare Link to the Past to Super Mario World for the narrative? Like,
right.
Not particularly.
You're playing the two games for two different reasons.
Yeah.
Exactly. And so I think what it comes down to then, what Jared said, is fun.
What's a better single player game? Yeah, what else does Zelda do that's better than Mario 64? Alright. Now, I think another thing we should keep in mind is the Shane test. Which one's more interesting with vodka?
Think really hard about it.
Which one? I don't know if either of these would be playable.
Oh, you can play Mario with vodka.
Mario 64 you can play with vodka.
Probably Mario is
sure, for sure.
There you go. Can't solve puzzles on vodka.
Yeah.
Well, I think but to go along with that though, you solve a puzzle in Ocarina of Time and you remember that puzzle, you will always remember how to solve that puzzle when you get to it. Versus Mario 64, when you're traversing through something, it's like, how can I do it better? How can I do it faster? And Ocarina of Time, generally, you solve the same puzzle.
And that kind of brings up the replayability factor.
But people can sequence break in Zelda.
Right, but we're talking about amongst friends, right? Like, when we get hammered playing Ocarina of Time, we're going to sit there and be like, how do we get through the wall to break the game? Right? We're not going to have that conversation. What we're really going to have is the Mario 64 conversation.
Yeah.
Try this, do this.
Both of these games feature music by Koji Kondo, and both of them are some of his masterpieces. But let's talk about the music for a second, as a last thing before moving into the final vote.
Sure. Mario 64 has better music.
Yeah, gut check for me, Mario 64.
Disagree.
Gut check for me, Mario 64 has better
Again,
music.
Gerard and I kind of brought this up earlier, but a lot of Zelda's music was already borrowed from Link to the Past, which is great music. but it was already made, whereas Mario 64 had almost entirely original composition.
That argument hasn't hit home with me in anything, but it does on this one because I'm so torn between the two that I do appreciate Mario 64 more because it's
Plus, what was established in Mario 64 canonically moved forward for a lot of the 3D platformer games. A lot of the later Mario games borrowed a lot of those same themes and did them bigger and better. The freaking Mario Galaxy 2 Bob on Battlefield remix is like one of the coolest things with big band music I've heard in forever.
And another thing to Zelda's credit, and I mentioned this when we were doing Ocarina of Time versus Majora's Mask, even though Majora's Mask does it better, the music in Ocarina of Time is part of the game. Like, you get an Ocarina, and you play these songs.
Oh yeah, like the actual Ocarina songs are iconic.
Yeah, absolutely.
But they're not like full songs, you know? And I'm not gonna put that on my MP3 player and like listen to
well,
listen to 7 notes.
Well, I mean, they created full scores for them, too. So you play the 6 notes, and then it does an actual song, you know? So it wasn't just the 6 notes.
I feel like both of the soundtracks are very good, and like either way, they wouldn't sway my opinion of the game.
Yeah, so maybe it's irrelevant.
That's fair.
But like one thing I did think about just now was 3D Mario platformers are still trying to be Mario 64. Zelda games aren't trying to be Ocarina of Time anymore.
I disagree.
I almost think it's the exact opposite.
I disagree until Breath of the Wild. I think that Skyward Sword tried to be different, but I feel that Twilight Princess and Wind Waker at times really tried to remind people.
Twilight Princess especially.
All right, this is it, guys. This is the big boy vote. Gotta put on our adult pants and decide which is better: Ocarina of Time or Super Mario 64.
My adult pants are already on. Mario 64. It's the better game for me.
Anyone else want to throw their pants into the ring? Jared.
Man, all I'm thinking about right now is every other best N64 game list ever, or best game ever list that's been done for the past 25 years since these games came out. And Ocarina of Time always hits number 1. And I always felt that happened for the reason. That reason was a lot of rose-tinted glasses. As a better Nintendo 64 game, Super Mario 64.
Where were you last round when I said the same thing about Banjo-Kazooie, motherfucker?
Super Mario 64 is just the better N64. Gerard, your thoughts then?
Mario 64.
Why are you mad at me?
You have the same answer.
Bad person. Austin, what do you think?
Well, honestly, I keep going back. I mean, it's irrelevant now, but I keep going back to what... I mean, I know, remember specifically Gerard said it. Which one translated better? I think that Mario 64 did. I think that Ocarina of Time was very similar to Link to the Past. Mario 64 was completely different. And in such a close call, that's really all I need on this split second to just decide and then hopefully not regret later. Mario 64.
The comment section will make us regret everything.
Oh yeah.
Are we really like... Well, I mean, I'll wait for you.
You know,
Where did the argument sway you?
my personal preference is The Legend of Zelda: Ocarina of Time, but based on your arguments, guys, it's clear cut. It's Super Mario 64.
Yeah, I think like when it comes to like personal favorite, like I like Ocarina more, but when it comes to what's a better N64 game, I think Mario's
That's
is
the
better.
kind of objectivity I respect about you, Jared.
Kind of like we said, where it translated to 3D better, made better use of 3D space, is more fun consistently throughout. You can screw around in it.
Once
You
you
can
beat the
choose how
game,
you want to do the game.
Right.
Once you beat the game, you can just keep going. We didn't really mention that. But.
Plus, Yoshi's on the house, bitches.
Once you beat it, you also unlock a special jump where
It sucks.
the third jump you don't get fall damage.
Yeah.
Stupid.
Hey guys, join us next time where we're gonna talk about this whole bracket and everything, all these hard decisions we had to make. This was fun. This was hard. A lot of enemies were made today.
Please subscribe.
Please subscribe. We also got a special guest on the next episode.
Of the post show?
Yeah.
It's awesome.
Hey.
Which game do you think should have been crowned the best N64 game? Let us know down below. If you enjoyed this, please like and do not forget to subscribe. We have a Madness post-show coming up next with a special guest, and then a few surprises as we prepare for the next season. And if you somehow haven't already, go check out the rest of the Madness matchups too.